They say silence stretches longest in wide open spaces. Out on the broken edge of Montana, where barbed wire lines the horizon and wind cuts through bone like memory, that silence had a name: Jonas Hale, a man of few words and fewer visitors. Jonas lived alone on a 60-acre cattle ranch with nothing but the dust, the dawn, and the ghosts of his past to keep him company. The fields were vast, gold-brushed in late summer, dotted with cattle that moved like slow shadows. But inside the farmhouse, time stood still. Photos left undusted, a dining table with only one chair pulled out, an old ceramic mug cracked down the handle, the one his wife used to drink from every morning. Before we begin this journey, subscribe, because sometimes the wildest storms leave behind the most unexpected blooms. He had grown used to the loneliness, not because it was kind, but because it was consistent. It didn't ask questions or require explanations. It just sat quietly beside him, the way regret often does. It was on a Tuesday, mid-September, that he heard the noise. He thought it was the wind playing tricks again. But then it came again, a dry, broken whimper, carried across the field like a whisper from the earth. At first, he ignored it, but something in that sound pierced the numbness he wore like a coat. He saddled his horse, more out of habit than urgency, and rode to the north fence line. There, beneath a rusted sign that read, "No trespassing," was a girl, 16, maybe younger, tied to the fence with a frayed piece of rope. Her face was bloodied at the lip, her knees scraped, her eyes swollen but defiant. She didn't cry. She just stared up at him like she was daring him to look away. She had no bag, no ID, just a bracelet made from twine and beads, the kind a child might make in summer camp. It was worn and dirty, but her wrist clutched it like it was the last thing she owned that mattered. He didn't ask her name at first. He didn't speak at all. He just cut the rope with his pocket knife, helped her onto the horse, and brought her home. The house was quiet when they arrived, the kind of quiet that leans in listening. She sat at the table while he made a sandwich, peanut butter, the only thing he had that didn't require effort. She didn't eat, just looked at it, then at the cracked mug in the dish rack. He noticed that night she slept in the guest room his wife once used for quilting. He left the door open a crack, just in case. The next morning, she was still there, and so was the silence. But it was different now, thicker, like the air before a storm. It took 3 days before she spoke. One word, "Thanks." That word planted something. Something fragile, like a seed in frozen soil. He didn't ask what had happened to her. He figured she'd tell him when she was ready. She started feeding the horses without being asked. She'd leave the door open a little longer when coming in from the barn, like she wanted to invite the wind in. She found his wife's piano in the back room and played a few clumsy notes. The sound startled them both, but she smiled and he didn't stop her. Her name, he learned, was Marley, and she had been running. Her father was a man who drank more than he spoke, who hit more than he hugged, who saw his daughter as a weight, not a wonder. And the fence, that rusted boundary where Jonas found her, wasn't just a marker of property. It was the place where her father decided she was no longer his problem. But Jonas had known abandonment, too. He once had a son, Jonah, barely 4 when the fever took him, and a wife who couldn't bear the weight of that grief, who folded into silence and then vanished one October morning without a note. Marley never asked about the photos on the mantle, and Jonas never asked about the bruises on her ribs. But they moved around each other like two ghosts sharing the same house, carefully, respectfully, waiting for the other to believe in the possibility of staying. The first snow came early. Marley woke up to the world blanketed in white. The trees bowed with the weight of it. She ran outside barefoot, laughing for the first time. Jonas watched from the porch, coffee in hand, something warm unraveling in his chest. That day, she found a dead bird outside the barn, small, with blue feathers and a bent wing. She buried it beneath the willow tree and marked it with a stone. She whispered something before walking away. Jonas never asked what. Winter deepened. Night stretched longer. Marley started making dinner. Nothing fancy, mostly canned soup and fried potatoes, but filled the house with scent and sound again. She put the cracked mug at Jonas's spot every evening, then one day switched it out with a new one she found at the town market. He didn't say anything, just drank. Then came the letter. It was in Marley's handwriting, tucked under his coffee mug one morning. It read, "If someone ever asks where I went, tell them I found a place that didn't hurt." That same morning, a pickup truck pulled up at the edge of the ranch. A man stepped out, lean, angry eyes like a snake. Marley froze when she saw him. Jonas stepped in front of her. The man claimed to be her father, claimed she was his, claimed he had a right to take her home. Jonas didn't move. The man lunged. Jonas held his ground. Then Marley did something no one expected. She stepped forward, held out the twine bracelet, and dropped it on the ground between them. "That part of me is gone," she said. Her voice didn't shake. The man sneered, spat on the dirt, and drove away. That night, Marley sat at the piano and played a full melody. Jonas didn't recognize the tune, but it felt like something lost and found all at once. The next morning, the barn was quiet. Too quiet. Jonas found her note on the table. "You gave me safety. Now I have to find strength. Don't follow me. I need to know if I can stand on my own." She was gone. Just like that, the silence returned. But it wasn't empty anymore. Jonas kept the piano dusted, kept her mug clean, left the door open a little longer at night. And then, months later, just as spring began to nudge the snow off the fields, he heard it, a soft melody, drifting in from the barn, the same one Marley had played. He followed the sound, heart pounding. Inside the barn stood a girl, older now, stronger, with eyes that had seen more but lost less. She turned. "I came back, not because I had to, but because now I know I can." The sky above Prairie Hollow stretched wide and tender, like an old quilt stitch with cloud and wind. The rancher stood by the barn, watching the girl who had come to him from chains. Her name was Mara, 16 years old, light as a feather but heavy with silence. She moved like a shadow across the land, always near, never quite touching it. Days passed, then weeks, and Mara spoke very little, only offering nods or averted eyes. She didn't scream, didn't cry, but every night, as the rancher sat by the wood stove reading the same dog-eared novel, he could hear her breathing from the loft, a rhythm just uneven enough to betray the weight she carried. Trauma didn't always wail. Sometimes it whispered through teeth clenched in sleep. She kept a piece of rope in her coat pocket, not the rope her father used, a different one, a small length she had braided herself from twine found in the barn. She touched it often, rolling it between her fingers like a talisman. The rancher noticed. He never asked. He just made sure there was enough hay in the loft and extra firewood stacked near the door. It was late autumn when he found her standing in the pasture at dawn, barefoot in the frost, staring at a broken fence post. He didn't interrupt. He just joined her, hands in his jacket pockets. She spoke first. "This was where I was left, back home, tied up like a dog. The rope left marks on the wood. And on me." He nodded, his breath misting in the morning air. She turned her face toward the wind. But the cold didn't hurt as much as knowing he walked away. And there it was, the wound, not physical, but cellular. That night, she left the twine on the kitchen table, coiled neatly beside the butter dish. From then on, something changed. She started feeding the chickens, brushing the horses. The dog, an old mutt named Bucket, followed her everywhere, as if he too had once been left behind and knew the cost of it. On Thanksgiving, the rancher roasted 2 chickens and set the table with mismatched plates. Mara came down wearing a dress that had once belonged to his late wife. It hung awkwardly on her, but she wore like armor. They ate in silence. Then Mara reached across the table and held out a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing, a tree with roots stretching deep beneath a house. One of the roots held a small girl curled up like a seed. He didn't ask. He just placed the drawing on the fridge and pinned it with a magnet shaped like a horseshoe. Winter crept in slow, burying the land in white. Mara began to hum while she mucked the stalls. Soft songs, nursery rhymes from someone else's memory. The rancher listened from afar, heart tugging at the edges. She started school in January. It was hard. She didn't speak unless called on, but she drew pages and pages of things she never said. And one day, the school counselor called a rancher in. Her father is being released early. He's filed a petition for custody. The world stopped. When he got home, Mara was sitting on the porch, arms wrapped around Bucket. He knelt beside her. "You don't ever have to go back. I won't let them. But we may need help proving that." She didn't flinch. She just nodded. The town rallied behind them. Neighbors wrote letters. Teachers testified. The sheriff even showed up in court, hat in hand, to say he'd seen the bruises, heard the rumors, and wished he'd acted sooner. The trial was long, ugly. Mara's father lied, cried, painted himself a changed man. But truth has a smell, and a stank of guilt. In the final moments, Mara stood, for the first time. She told the court about the fence, about the hunger, the rope burns, the silence, and then she said, "But the worst part was not being missed. Not by him, not by anyone. Until now." The judge granted full guardianship to the rancher. No appeal. Outside the courthouse, Mara didn't smile. She just exhaled. Later that night, back at the ranch, she brought out another drawing. This time, it was of a new tree, taller, brighter, and hanging from one of its branches was a swing made of rope. She placed it beside the first drawing on the fridge. Spring bloomed. The fence posts were mended. Mara's laughter began showing up in the air like pollen. On her 17th birthday, the rancher gave her a toolbox, so you can build whatever you want. Fix what needs fixing. She opened it, found inside a folded cloth, her braided twine, now sewn into a bracelet. She wore it without words. The story doesn't end with a parade or a headline. It ends with a girl planting sunflowers behind the barn, with a man learning to make pancakes without burning them, with a dog who never sleeps alone anymore, and a home, quiet, strong, and whole. Before you go, subscribe, because healing is slow, but it's real, and sometimes it starts with a rope, a rancher, and a second chance whispered through morning frost.